Hey everybody, I am Carolyn Byers, Education Director at Madison Audubon, and usually I'm out teaching in public, sometimes at schools and community centers, other times doing field trips for adults and families, and now I'm doing lots of virtual lessons. So we have our Safer and Funner webpage on the MadisonAudubon.org webpage, and you can check out all of our lessons and activities. Most of them are great for kids. A lot of them are fun for adults too. There's stuff about nature journaling and nature art and all sorts of stuff if you feel like you need a little relaxation in nature or like you want to learn. So again, you can find that on MadisonAudubon.org on our website, and there's a page for Safer and Funner at Home. So today, right now, I'm going to be talking all about secretive marsh birds. They are super awesome, really cool, and I think they're fun because they are a bit of a challenge. I think, like when I was talking about sparrows during our sparrow ID lesson, I like the birds that make you work for it a little bit more. Big, flashy, easily identifiable birds. They're fun, they're beautiful, but I've been birding for a long time, like since I was a little kid. And so whenever I get a bird that, I can't quite figure out, or I really need to look up in a field guide or follow for a while to identify it, I think it's super fun. So don't get discouraged if you're just starting your birding journey and you're finding these groups of birds hard, because I think the ones that push you are the ones that they're worth it. Same with friends, right? Okay, so I just want to take a quick peek at our Facebook page because I want to make sure I can see the comments. My phone is giving me trouble about viewing comments on it. For fun. So don't get discouraged if you're just starting. Okay, so now I can see comments. That's good. So if you have questions, type them in and I will answer them. Hi, Sherry. Thanks for saying hi. Okay, so marsh birds are cool. We're going to talk a little bit about behavior, about why marsh birds are the way that they are, and then we're going to go through identification and calls for some of our marsh birds. All right, and I just want to give you a little heads up where the lesson is headed. So marsh birds aren't really secretive, right? They're just hard for humans to find. We don't spend a lot of time out in marshes. And when we do go, it's a little bit hard to know what to look for or listen for unless you've studied up ahead of time, right? So marshes are a wet grassland. So they are typically populated by tall grasses, cattails, rushes, and they're usually very dense vegetation. Of course, there's a lot of variation, but that tall, dense vegetation makes it a safe place from predators. So not many predators venture out into a marsh. And also it makes it hard for birds to see each other when they're down in the grass. So a lot of birds that are, say, in forests, they're very visual. They have a lot of bright colors. They have a lot of displays that they use to attract mates. And marsh birds have that to some extent, but most of them are really cryptically colored. Like think of wrens and bitterns that are brown and streaky. Same with rails. So a lot of them are very cryptically colored, very well camouflaged, and they mostly use their voice to communicate with other members of their species. And I mean, of course, all birds use their voice to do that, but marsh birds especially. And so they're really well adapted to this very wet environment. And I did some research out on salt marshes in New England and especially up in Maine. And it was really neat seeing how all those birds in the marshes were really well adapted to tides too, which I'm from Buffalo, New York. And so I hadn't spent a lot of time around tides full disclosure, I don't like tides. I think it's very weird that things are not as predictable as perhaps they could be. But those birds a lot of them have a nesting cycle that fits in between the tides. And so they will start building a nest after a very high tide, and then they'll hopefully raise their chicks right before the next high tide happens. And so it's really remarkable how evolution has helped these birds survive in a really crazy environment. So speaking of nesting, so a lot of our marsh birds will either build nests that are up in the vegetation. So think of a red-winged blackbird nest that is woven around all the standing cattail reeds. Of course, red-winged blackbirds can nest in many different habitats, but when they're out in marshes, they weave their nests around the cattails that suspends them above the water and keeps them safer from predators, and also the water if they build it up high enough. Some of our marsh birds, like rails and coots, will build nests on floating mats of vegetation. My husband did some Secretive Marsh Birds surveys down in Florida and I think maybe New Jersey too. But he has stories of these mats where he can jump on them and it looks like the ground, but it's really just mats of vegetation floating on the water. And it all moves like a really intense waterbed. And those birds also sometimes build their own nests that float near the edge of the water. So they're very, very well adapted to living in marshes. Sherry says that Cherokee Marsh and Horicon Marsh are great spots in Wisconsin if you want to go and look for marsh birds. I love Horicon. I haven't been there this year. They have a lot of really great trails that get you out near the marsh and boardwalks in the marsh. And of course, Cherokee Marsh is a lot closer to Madison if that's where you're based. And I've actually seen, a Henslow sparrow is not a marsh bird, but it is a bird that requires really good habitat, and those are out there in the prairies. And I know that there was a rail seen out at Cherokee Marsh, or heard, and I forget what type of rail it was. So if anyone is watching and has seen or heard of the rail that was seen earlier this year at Cherokee Marsh, let me know what it was. Okay, so all of these, and I also should mention that a lot of these birds are crepuscular or nocturnal. So nocturnal, of course, means that these birds are awake during the night, and crepuscular means that they're awake and active on the edges, so at dawn and dusk. So I was talking about secretive marsh bird surveys before, and that's when scientists go out and they will listen for these birds because that's the best way to detect them. And then they'll wait for a little while, and then they'll play a recording of their song. And of course, this is not something we would do if we weren't in a scientific study. You don't want to stress the birds out unduly. And, if you're not doing it in a rigorous, respectful way. But they would play a recording of the song and then wait to see if they called back. And these surveys that he was doing, he would need to be at the location of his first survey at least a half hour before dawn, which is true of a lot of bird surveys, but for marsh birds especially, got to get up early. Okay, so I think we should jump into some bird ID, right? So we think of marsh birds, and I think of grebes, I think of bitterns, rails, which are also related to soras and moorhens and coots. And then I think of herons and egrets and wrens. I love them all. They're the best. Okay, so I today am going to be looking birds up in my Sibley guide, mostly because it is the largest one that I have and it'll provide the best visuals. But I also really love Sibley. I think that the amount of information in here is what I need it to be. But I loved Peterson's when I was first starting out. I think that guide does a really good job of offering just the right amount of information. It's good for when you're starting. Okay, so the first bird that I have is a pied-billed grebe, and it actually I see this one really frequently, so I don't think of it as being particularly secretive, but it's a fun one and I wanted to share it anyways. So this is an adult in breeding plumage, and they're called a pied-billed grebe because their beak has two different colors on it. So the black stripe in the middle and the lighter sort of ivory colored base color to the beak. I, however, like to think of a pie-billed grebe, and I think that their very triangular wedge-shaped beak looks a little bit like a slice of pie. So that's how I first remembered how to identify these birds. Their juveniles are so nice and streaky, stripy. So keep your eye out for them if you're out in a marsh these days. And these ones, I often see them, out in the open in a wet area, pailing around with ducks. So they're not as secretive as some of the other birds on this list. But I am going to be playing the calls for some of these birds, all of them, because I like them. And so I have them on my computer, so the sound is better when I play them that way. So this is the pied-billed grebe, and I'm using the National Audubon website for this. It's audubon.org. And if you just Google, the bird you're looking for and Audubon, it will take you right where you want to go. Okay, so here is the song of a pied-billed grebe. Let me know in the comments if you're having trouble hearing this or if this sounds okay. One of my favorite things while listening to bird calls is identifying the birds in the background, and this one had a yellow-headed blackbird in it, which was kind of nice to hear. Okay, so I'm gonna play a song duet. So this will be two birds calling back and forth to each other. Not calling back and forth, calling at the same time. They're singing together. And so those are the songs of the pied-billed grebe. And they also make a few different calls. So this is what they're describing as a chatter call. The pied-billed grebe. And so grebes sit fairly low in the water. They're really good divers, so they'll head underwater and stay there for a little while, maybe pop up in a different place. And all grebes have really cool feet. They're lobate feet. So you know how ducks have webbed feet, right? They have webbing in between their toes. The grebe looks like, honestly, their toes looked like if you took balls of Play-Doh and then smushed them. It's like little flattened discs along their toe, and it makes their feet more paddle-like and helps them to move through the water a little better. They're not quite webbed, but they're still really good at walking on land, and they look really cool. You should Google a picture of a grebe foot if you like. All right, so that was our pied-billed grebe. I'm going to go pop back and see if there's any questions. Oh, good sound. That's great to hear. Hey, Galen. Hey, Jane. Good to see you. All right, so that was our pied-billed grebe. Next on my list is the American bittern. And if you happen to do bird yoga with me, this is on that list. Let me bring up the call for you. Oops, there we go. Cool, and I'll find it in here. So the bittern is related to herons. And this bittern, the American bittern, is definitely what I think of when I think secretive marsh bird. I have only seen maybe two in something like 15 years of real birding. And they are really neat when you see them. So they often spend a lot of their time with their head tucked really far down. They have a very long neck. like other herons. Come on, bittern, got it. But they also, bitterns do this really neat thing where they, when they're standing in the tall grasses in a marsh, they will stretch their neck up, and then we can do the yoga pose if you want. They'll sway with the cattails in the breeze, so that they're not only their coloring helps camouflage them, but the movement of more like grass. And they'll do this both when they're hunting and when they're trying to evade detection. So bitterns are pretty darn neat. Okay, let us listen to the call. So remember the pied-billed grebe, they had a song, and then they had, I think it was a chatter call or something. This one is labeled as an onka-chonk. So let's listen to the American bittern's onka-chonk. Oh. That's quieter. Can you hear that? I think it sounds like glugging, like there's water in a big jug and it's sloshing around. They also have, it says, a flight call. Let's see what that sounds like. And the flight call sounds to me like something my dad was trying to get me believe a bird sounds like. But like that. So I'm going to play the bittern's onka-chonk again, or the glugging call. It's just so cool that comes from a bird. That's a neat sound. Okay, and American bitterns are pretty large. Okay, so it says their length is 28 inches. And I just want to compare that to a bird that is a little bit more visible. So a green heron, which I think a lot of people, well, more people might have seen. Green herons, they're still pretty small, but they have a length of 18 inches. So a bittern is larger than a green heron. By quite a bit, by 10 inches. The least bittern, though, is only 13 inches long. So this is the least bittern. I have only seen one of these, and it was at HorrorCon. We were canoeing through a really lovely patch of cattails, and there were, I think, 2 little least bitterns popping around right at the edge. It was a really fun experience. And then a great horned owl flew over, and we were all like, what are you doing out here? That's weird. But that was neat too. So this is our little least bittern. They're very small. When I saw them that one time, really small sample size, they were hopping around in the grasses like this with their necks tucked up. Yeah, I've never seen one flying. This is what they look like in flight. They have some really neat color patterns on them. They're really small. Let's go find the call of the least bittern. I think you're gonna like this one. I'm gonna check the comments while we're here. Cool, I'm glad you were able to hear the American bittern. Okay, so these are labeled as chuckling calls. So here is chuckling call number 1. Doesn't seem to be playing it. Let's try number 3. There we go. I don't know if this will be useful to anyone, but so one of our cuckoos, their call goes coo 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 coo. And this sounds like a frog making a croaking noise with the same cadence of the cuckoo. So I'm going to play that again. This is the chuckling call of the least bittern. And I'll hold it up because it's easier to remember if you see it at the same time. All right. And there's one listed here as, it just says other call. I'm curious, so I'm going to click it. Well, that did not disappoint. I'm glad we went there. So that is the other call of the least bittern. We're going to play it one more time just for fun. Now it's not working. Come on. Oh, that's good. All right, so we took care of our bitterns. We had the least, we had the American bittern, and let's do some rails. I don't know Virginia rail on this list. That's an oversight. I added it in, even though I'm gonna do it right now. Okay, we gotta find the Virginia rail. And I don't know that I know precisely where rails are in this field guide. It's funny, there used to be a time, like I remember distinctly sitting in the car with my dad, and I was home on a break from college, and we were on the Niagara River, because we're in Buffalo. And he was looking at a duck, and he was like, oh, I don't know, I think it might be, and he said some kind of duck, I forget what it is now. But he was flipping through the field guide trying to find it, and he couldn't. And I was like, I told him the precise page number it was on, because I had spent so much time during my ornithology class and when I was TAing looking for this bird, or all the birds really. And now I don't know where rails are. Interesting. Okay, so here's a Virginia rail. These birds are this big. When I was studying birds on salt marshes, we got to do some banding, and I was able to band a Virginia rail. So they are actually this big. They have really, they look like they have really round bodies, but they're really only round this way. If you were to look at a rail head on, they're compressed, they're laterally compressed, so that they can sneak through cattails really easily without disturbing the vegetation a lot. Because if they're disturbing a lot of veg, then predators or people might find them. So Virginia rail is, it's more common than bitterns. At least I see them more frequently. Let me look one up so that I can pull the sound up for you. Let's see. I love that you're all commenting about how beautiful these birds sound. Makes me happy. All right, so our Virginia rail is kind of reddish. It's got a long reddish orangish bill, some nice striping here, some good black and white streaking on its flanks. I also often note this black cap, but in general, when I see them in the wild, I notice them being really reddish. Okay, they also have a nice red eye when they are an adult. So here we go. They have a lot of different names for their calls. So this is called the kick-a-dick call. I think it sounds like a toy car horn. Beep, 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 beep. And here's another variation of the kick-a-dick call. It's got a little something fancy on the end. Okay, so I hear that a lot when I'm out birding, or at least that is the call that I hear rails doing more frequently. This is the grunt display. I don't think I've ever heard them do that in the wild. If you have heard that, send it in the comments. I would love to hear about the rails grunting. I think they sound a little like pigs there. Okay, and this one, 2 and 3 parted calls of an immature. Let's listen. Very squeaky. I should show you the rail. It's a lot easier for me, at least, to remember their sounds if I look at them while they're making that noise. And I should also say that rails and like Soras and Coots, when they fly, at least, okay, so I'm not talking about when they're flying on migration or something. These birds do migrate. They're, I mean, if they migrate, they got to be pretty strong flyers, right? But when you catch them flying, just like in the marsh away from you, they often look like they're reluctant to fly. Like they want to stay down in the grass. Like they just sort of pop up just high enough to get over the cattails, and they look a little like heavy moths to me. Like they're very flappy. They have rounded paddle-like wings, and they have smaller wings for their body than I would expect. So if you see them, or if you see a bird that looks like that, think rail or Sora when you're trying to ID it. Okay, so let's look up a moorhen next. I want to do let's do a Sora because it's right on the page next to it. Sora. These ones I see way more frequently than Virginia rails. I was out at Cherokee Marsh with my toddler, and we were making all kinds of noise, and I mean, it's hard to bird with a toddler. But I saw one of these just walk right out of the grass into a wettish area, and then it saw us and was like, whoa, and, you know, scampered back into the grass. But these ones, I think, are, at least I have seen more of them than Virginia rails. So it's a good bird to learn how to ID visually as well as by their call. So I'm going to go find the Sora. I really also like, scientists have 4-letter codes for all the birds, and there are a few exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, if it's a long one named bird, or there's one word in the bird's name, it's the first 4 letters. If it's 2 words, like Virginia rail, it would be the first 2 letters of each of the names. But I love that Sora is only 4 letters, and so its 4-letter code is just its name. And I think that's fun. Sora. Oh, Galen says, my grandchildren and family recently found 3 Virginias walking in a park in Minnesota. They went back and forth in the cattails for all of them to see. That is really cool. That's a nice Virginia rail sighting, especially if they had kids in the bunch. That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Galen. And someone is telling me the video is freezing. I'm sorry about that. My internet is a little unpredictable sometimes. All right, so now I have some Sora calls for you. So this is going to be the Winnie call of a Sora. I hear that one quite a bit. They are very vocal, very chatty, and I also hear them not just at the edges of the day during the crepuscular times, but I hear that during during the day. So I'll play that again. Soras are pretty chatty. Did anybody else hear the American bittern glugging in the background of that one? That was cool. Okay, so they also say that they do a call called a curwee. Let's see what that sounds like. Curwee? I hear this one a lot too. Curwee? Nice. Okay, so that was our Sora. Let's see. Let's go find a common moorhen. And you know what? This is on the list. But I don't know how frequently I see these. Here's a moorhen. Let me know if you've seen moorhens in Wisconsin and Madison. It does say they're here during the summer. I don't see them very much. In fact, I don't know if I've seen one since I was back east. So let's go listen to a moorhen's call. Whoops. All right. The name's been changed to gallinule. Name changes. Part of me loves that birders are constantly looking at data and, you know, lumping and splitting species based on genetics and new findings. I think that's awesome that we're all flexible enough to be willing to take in new scientific information and, you know, adjust how we view the world because of it. I think that's an important area in a lot of the aspects of our lives. But it's frustrating when names keep changing. Changed my moorhen to a gallinule. All right, so let's play this bird a little bit. So this is described as Winnie-like outbursts. Marsh birds are the best. All right, this one's called Resonant Keek Calls. Cool. This is grating calls. Sounds like a cross between a goose and a heron, I think. Maybe it should just sound like a gallinule. But I always like to compare bird sounds, new bird sounds to me, to other birds that I know. It really helps me make connections between the sounds. It helps me remember that one particular bird. Okay, so that was the common gallinule, formerly the moorhen. Okay, and the last bird on the official Secretive Marsh Bird list is the American coot. But I think most of the people watching this probably know that coots are not secretive. These guys, at least, or gals, in Madison, they form huge rafts on our lakes during the winters that are like hundreds and hundreds of coots all floating together. So these are a dark bird. They look very duck-like. They hang out with ducks, and they have a ivory-colored bill, and it has they have an orange or a reddish dot right on the top of their forehead. These are very common birds, in my opinion. A coot. Let's go find what they sound like. Ooh, Galen says that moorhens are at Zalosky Marsh. So I need to, or gallinules, sorry, not moorhens. Horicon and Zalosky Marsh. I got to get out and I got to find a Wisconsin gallinule, because it's no good to just have eastern gallinules. I need to find one here in this state, right? All right, so this is the sound of the American coot. Here we go. And when I hear that, it's usually like hundreds of them all at once out in the distance. Let's listen to another one. Sounds like it has a question. So these are all coot noises. The American coot. Nice. All right, so there are a few other birds that I really associate with marshes. Red-winged blackbirds, of course, and how about I play their sounds there, just in case there's anyone who wants a refresher. And red-winged blackbirds are very visible, I think, when you go into a marsh. The males are constantly singing. They're perched up pretty high. They are often flying around. They're very visible. So this is a male red-winged blackbird. Blackbird, red wing, a yellow stripe usually on the lower part of that, their epaulet feathers. This is the female though. And she's a good bird to identify if you're just starting out, because she is a little bit smaller than the male. They have the same basic body shape, same beak shape. Their legs look the same, but she is colored a lot like a sparrow, so brown and streaky. Not as they were clearly looking at the male when they described the red-winged blackbird. So a lot of beginning birders often get tripped up with this bird just because it looks so different from the male. She also has beautiful peach armpits, something to look for when you see her fly. I really, really love female red-winged blackbirds. Okay, so these birds, their song is something I really link to spring. I love hearing them. And wow, there are a lot of songs. You should go to the Audubon page and look at the list of songs they have under red-winged blackbirds. Clearly people have been recording them for a long time. All right, so this is one of their songs. And this is the one that I really resonate with. People think it sounds like conklery. Conklery. So they also have alarm whistles that they use a lot, especially if perhaps you get too close to their nest. Here's what that sounds like. Pew! It's really loud, really piercing. All right, so I'm going to play the female chatter songs while I go check the comments, and then I'll play the male song again. Excellent. Okay, and here's the male song again. And before I move on from red-winged blackbirds, I should wait until it's done singing. That's the redwing. One of the cool facts I love about these birds is that first of all, the juvenile males, they'll begin to get this red patch, but it'll be streaked with black. And so you can tell when a young bird is just achieving its adult plumage. But the other thing is that when a bird is very dominant, it will display these red patches. And when it's trying to be dominant, it will display them. But if a male is, say, more of a subordinate male and is trying to sneak into a dominant male's territory, either for food or perhaps to court its female, not its female, the female, they will cover their bright red patches with their black feathers so that they can look less dominant, less threatening, and hopefully not get kicked out of the territory. So when you're looking at these birds, there's a whole lot of behavior that you can study. So if you get out to a marsh and, maybe you got there late and it's really hot out and not many birds are singing, but you can still probably see a lot of red-winged blackbirds out there. So even though they're very common, you can learn a whole lot about bird behavior from them. So give red-winged blackbirds another look when you're out, because they're pretty cool. All right, so we got the red-winged blackbird. I want to talk about some wrens next. Sedge wrens and marsh wrens, because wrens are the best. We have a house wren. It refuses to nest in the box that I put up. It's been up for 5 years, 6 years maybe, and it's never never even built a dummy nest in it. But I'm struggling to find the wrens again in my field guide. I should spend more time in here. But I just love their songs. The wrens are so vocal, so loud, and so bubbly. I think they're really fun. Ha! I found them. I was about to go look in the index. Don't tell anyone. Okay, so this is the house wren that everybody that you can see in neighborhoods. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Reddish, brownish, very fine streaking, and they often hold their tail cocked up pretty high. Let's see, sedge wren and marsh wrens are the two that I want to talk about. And sedge wrens are maybe more common in grasslands that are a little bit wet, so on the drier end of the wetland spectrum. And marsh wrens are more common further out where there's a lot more water. I say further out figuratively because I guess we're not really on a coast or anything. But the main way I tell them apart is because sedge wrens have a lot of lines on their back, and marsh wrens look like they have, I don't know, sort of a brown cape on their back. And there's, of course, other field marks that you could look at. Maybe that's not how you recognize them. These marsh wrens have a much more obvious cap on their head. It's larger and redder, and these birds have more of a streaky top to their head. So there's other ways you can tell them apart, but I like to look at their backs if I get a good look at that and see whether or not they have this brown patch there. So remember, the marsh wren has that little brown patch. The sedge wren does not. And I mentioned how wrens building dummy nests earlier when I was talking about my nest box. So the male for, I believe, all wren species, but definitely sedge wren, marsh wren, house wren, they will build a few, they're called dummy nests. So it's like they build the scaffolding for a nest. And then the female will look at all of them and decide which one she wants to finish and use as a nest. And then I believe they'll both finish the nest together. So the dummy nests are partly part of the male's courtship display, so that he can show off his nest building skills, and partly also a nest defense mechanism, because if there are many fake nests near their real nest, the chances that a predator will find their real nest might be a bit lower. So sedge wrens, and I think marsh wrens too, they build a nest that's shaped like a ball. And sedge wrens, I have a lot more experience with sedge wren nests because I studied grassland bird nesting ecology. So I found a fair few sedge wren nests. But they're about the size of a softball, about this big. And, well, I guess that's bigger than a softball. They're about that big. And usually in a grassland, like a prairie, they're positioned about knee high for me, maybe a bit higher. But if there's a lot more water in the environment, it might be a bit higher, up above the water. And those round nests provide a lot of camouflage for those chicks, because really all the activity that can be seen is the parents coming and going through a tiny little hole in the side of the nest. Otherwise, the chicks can't be seen unless they stick their heads out of the nest, and it does block a lot of the sound. It's a lot quieter at those nests than at other nests. There's a lot of comments. I like it. So I'll play the songs for these wrens. Their wrens are harder to see out in the grasses than, say, a red-winged blackbird is. A lot of them will perch just up high enough so that their voice can carry over the grasses, and then they might drop down, or they'll perch slightly below the highest level of the grass, and they're just so small and very well camouflaged. So I often, when I hear it singing, I have to hunt for quite a while to find it perched. So knowing their call is really helpful when you're trying to figure out what's out in the marsh and where it is. Okay, so I'm going to play, let's do the sedge wren first, and then I'll go read some comments while it's playing. Oh, my internet's slow right now. I hope it's not cutting out too much for all of you. Okay. Sedge wrens. Still waiting. I'm sorry. All right, here we go. Sedge wrens. Here's the song. So the sedge wren to me, I remember it as chip chip and then a high trill and then chip chip and then a lower pitch trill. So like in my brain, I literally think chip chip high, chip chip low. So I'm going to play that again, and maybe you can hear that. Chip chip high, chip chip low. So I see some people asking in the comments if this is going to be recorded. Yeah, so you can share this with people or come back and watch it again later. It will be on our Facebook page. It'll be on our YouTube channel, and I think it'll probably get tossed on our Safer and Funner at Home webpage too. But I'm not sure about that last one. But you can certainly find it on our Facebook page and on YouTube. All right, so that was the sedge wren. Let's go find the marsh wren now. And I saw a good question in here in the comments. So someone asked a question about, she says, I go to Kensington Metro Park in Michigan and enjoys the marsh birds. I have noticed that the local birds in my city are quite vocal, even more so seemingly than in the past. Their calls are so different from marsh birds. Any explanations or comments about the differences in bird calls based on locations? So she says they're so different from marsh birds. So I guess I don't know what kind of birds you're comparing to marsh birds, just the local birds. And so broadly, to answer that, different birds that live in different habitats vocalize in different ways because sound travels through different habitats differently. And so like in grasslands where there's a lot of wind, many birds have very small, quiet, buzzy sounds, and they're not going to be heard from a long ways away. But those birds also have usually some kind of flight display. They fly above the grasses to display to potential mates. Birds in forests where visibility is low have very loud calls, and birds like we're talking about now in marshes, they often vocalize using sound too, just because it's so hard to hear other birds. So generally, birds in different habitats vocalize in different ways. But there are really cool differences in bird songs based on location. And birds have dialects just like humans do. So, we can tell maybe where a human is from, a person, based on the way they sound. So we know what, a British accent sounds like or an Australian accent. And of course, we can tell if someone is speaking a different language and hopefully what language that is. But even within the United States, there are different dialects that humans have. People from the South maybe talk a little slower. People in Boston have a lot going on. Same in the Midwest. There's all sorts of tropes about the way Midwesterners speak. Birds are the same way. So a lot of the birds will migrate back and forth to the same location. So birds that summer in Wisconsin always come back to Wisconsin to summer, for the most part. Same thing with birds going to New England. And some species of birds are so specific in where they return that, there was an island I was visiting off the coast of Maine when I was a student. And the common yellowthroats, which is a type of warbler living on that island, sounded different than on the mainland. And it was only maybe 2 miles offshore. So it was a very small distance as far as a bird. Birds kept returning to the same place. They evolved to have their own dialect. So that's a really cool thing that if you want to learn more about birds and bird songs, that's worth looking into. It's really cool. All right, so that was a fun question. I liked it, but I was going to tell you, we just did the sedge wren. Now we're going to do the marsh wren. It's hard to remember. Okay, so remember the sedge wren was chip, chip high, chip, chip low. And now this is going to be the marsh wren. And there's eastern subspecies and western subspecies, which is kind of neat. I'm going to click eastern because that usually just means east or west of the Rockies, not necessarily eastern United States. I don't have a very good mnemonic for this one. It's hard for me to remember. And they sound so neat. This is the marsh wren. Sibley describes this as a gurgling, rattling trill with distinctive musical and mechanical quality. Usually introduced by a few tech notes, like tech, 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 like that. And it says that the eastern one is more musical and less rattling. So let's play that again. Awesome. Oh, Galen asks, are they imitating frogs? I don't know. I can look that up. That's a cool question. Okay, so I have run through most of the birds that I want to talk about. I'm going to touch on herons briefly now. But if you have any questions, get them in now because I'm going to need to end this video soon because I'm going to be announcing our virtual summer camp. So stick around for that if you want, but know that I'm going to have to end this soon. So get your questions in. So other birds that I see in wetlands very often are herons and egrets. And these birds are secretive in the sense that, you can scan the marsh with binoculars and maybe not see them on the first couple passes you go by, but then all of a sudden you'll see, 4 heads popping out and you haven't realized that they were there that whole time. They're very, very well camouflaged, and just the way their body moves and the way their head can extend or contract, it offers them a lot of camouflage. But once you see them, they're really large. They stick out, and especially the egrets, they are just they're really bright. So in Wisconsin, great blue herons are really common. I see them all the time. And these birds, I don't hear vocalizing quite as much unless you're near a rookery. So herons and egrets, they nest in trees, actually, which was surprising to me when I first learned it. But they nest up in trees, and they're usually communal nesters. So there'll be, 5 or 10 nests together in a small colony. Larger ones will have many more nests. So there they can be pretty loud, but I often don't hear them vocalizing out, when they're foraging or during non-breeding seasons. So this is our great blue heron. It's pretty large, smaller than a sandhill, but a large bird, nice and tall. And great egrets are, that's the great white heron, the white morph. This is the great egret over here. And this is only something you need to worry about, the white morph, if you're in Florida. So if you see a white bird the size of a great blue heron in Wisconsin, think great egret, okay? And great egrets are less common in Wisconsin than they are out east. I was surprised at that when I got here. So these birds, they have the yellow bill, which is the easiest way to identify them or distinguish them between the snowy egret. Snowy egrets are a lot smaller than great egrets, but honestly, I'm pretty bad at judging the size of a bird, especially if it's out in a wetland with, where distance is hard to gauge. So I rely a lot on the color of the beak. So again, snowy egrets have that dark beak, great egrets have their yellow beak. Incidentally, the 4-letter bird code for a great egret is Greg, G-R-E-G, which I like. Snowy egrets also have black legs with yellow feet. So if they do bring their feet up out of the water, you can check out that. All right, so we've got great blue heron, great egret, snowy egret. And I think maybe we could talk about the green heron a little bit, just show that pretty quickly too. So we mentioned this green heron briefly in the beginning. They are a smaller heron, and they often have their neck tucked in. I very rarely see them like this unless they're about to strike at a prey item. But I've seen green herons, along the edges of the Madison lakes, along, creeks with bike paths near them. So they are far more common than I initially thought they were. They're pretty cool little birds. So something to look for, like as you're just biking the bike paths or out exploring Madison this summer. Okay, so I'm going to check out comments. I don't see any new ones, although someone sent hugs from Uruguay. It's good to see you. That's pretty cool. All right. So I have to run because I'm about to announce our summer camp. If you have suggestions for more classes to do like this, like if you want a grassland bird ID one, or let's see, maybe raptors we could do. I'm not a raptor expert. That I would have to study up for that one. But grasslands for sure. Let me know in the comments because we've got a whole summer to plan for lessons like this. So let me know what you want to see. Also, all of this programming is free for kids, free for adults. So if you have the means and you're enjoying this, please drop us a donation, help support us, help keep this going. This was really fun. I'm glad you all tuned in, and I will see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.